Momentum that we're seeing in Tunisia. People are angry not only at the fact that there are still remnants of Ben Ali's regime within the government, but also the fact that many of their problems and issues have not been dealt with, like unemployment and like investigations into the many deaths and injuries during these protests which led to the fall of Ben Ali.
The French Foreign Minister Michel Alliot-Marie has resigned after weeks of pressure over her links to the regime of Tunisia's former president. Alliot-Marie flew to Tunisia for a holiday during the unrest in a plane belonging to a businessman linked to President Ben Ali. She also offered French riot police to help quell the unrest. In her resignation letter to President Sarkozy, Alliot-Marie denied any wrongdoing. Now over to Libya now, where latest reports from the west of the country say anti-government forces are preparing for a counter-offensive by troops loyal to Muammar Gaddafi in the city of AlJazeera. It's just 50 kilometres west of the capital, Tripoli. According to witnesses, it's now surrounded by pro-Gaddafi forces. The centre of AlJazeera is in the hands of rebels. These are the latest pictures from the city, which are said to show tanks seized by anti-Gaddafi fighters. They've also mounted heavy machine guns on the back of pickup trucks. We've also seen pictures of celebrations there, including people chanting in the city centre and on tops of the roofs of buildings. Meanwhile, Libya's third largest city, Misrata, is reportedly also in opposition hands. Witnesses say, though, tanks are moving towards the western city. On the diplomatic front, the UN Security Council has unanimously backed sanctions on Gaddafi and his inner circle, along with an arms embargo. Bernard Smith has this report.
Just 50 kilometres west of Tripoli, the town of AlJazeera is now one of the front lines in the battle between pro- and anti-Gaddafi forces. This footage was shot by journalists escorted by Gaddafi's regime, eager to show that the country is in their control. What the reporters found was a city in rebel hands, for now at least. AlJazeera is surrounded by pro-Gaddafi forces. Both sides have tanks and anti-aircraft guns. Gaddafi's crackdown has been the bloodiest and most ruthless in the wave of uprisings sweeping the region. But it doesn't seem to have stemmed the tide against his 42-year rule. And in Benghazi, signs of a return to normal. The city's banks have reopened in this eastern city, which has now been free of Gaddafi's rule for almost 5 days.
The banks have been closed for 8 days, but thanks to our brave young men, they've managed to reopen in an orderly fashion. And praise be to God, everything is moving along smoothly.
And while Benghazi's residents stock up at the supermarket, the power vacuum that was left in this city is being filled. The series of committees that are governing towns and cities in the east have appointed a leader. Mustafa Abdel-Jalil was Libya's former justice minister.
What is happening in Libya is a popular revolution led by the youth, supported by the people against oppression and against the dictator who has led Libya with a singular point of view and with a vengeful attitude and bloodthirsty soul. Now we announce to the world that we intend to build a democratic nation with institutions that respect international obligations and treaties.
The mainstay of Libya's economy, oil production, appears to be grinding to a halt. This refinery is pumping 11,000 barrels a day, almost a tenth of normal capacity, according to the manager. The site's expatriate workers have fled as Libya's uprising unfolds. Bernard Smith, Al Jazeera.
Libya's former justice minister has formed a national council based in Benghazi as the official face of the revolution. The body wants the international community to impose a no-fly zone over Libya, but it doesn't want military intervention.
We've come up with a new constitution and strategy for the implementation of democratic elections in Libya under the supervision of international organizations.
Well, Al Jazeera's Hoda Abdelhamid is in Benghazi. Hoda, I know you've been speaking to members of this National Council. Tell us more about it.
Well, I think that the point of the National Council is to try to give some sort of image to this revolution, to try to have a point of contact for the international community if it did indeed want to get in touch with the opposition, and also to try at the moment at least to have all the different tribes and all the different movements really Libya, which are many, under one umbrella. I think this National Council would be a prelude to an interim government if indeed the regime in Tripoli fell. But at the moment it's just there trying to represent the people, trying to find a formula on the way ahead. Their main point is that they want to rewrite the constitution based on the 1951 constitution. That's the constitution that predates Muammar Gaddafi. They also want to find a way to pave the way for elections after the fall of the regime. If that happens, they say that that should be able to happen within 6 months, and they would like that to be under the monitoring of international observers.
And what about the people there that you're speaking to? Are they optimistic that that this resistance is going to succeed, or are they worried about the counter-offensive we're now hearing about in towns like AlJazeera and Misrata?
I think it's really a mixed bag of feelings. People are optimistic because I don't think anyone in Libya believed that they could go so far. There had been many efforts in the past to try to have an uprising, but that was quickly crushed by Gaddafi. So there is a sort of disbelief that gives them a lot of energy that it's gone so far, and that other parts of the country are also falling into the hand of the opposition. But there's also a bit of worry. Someone told me that he thinks that Benghazi, for example, considered a liberated city, is only 80% liberated. This person says to me that he's part of the security committee, and he has information that there are a lot of sleeper cells still around the city. So certainly there is a feeling that anything could happen, that things could go wrong. They do say that Gaddafi is an unpredictable man. They say that usually when he threatens something, he actually follows suit with that threat. So there is a bit of, I would say, cautious optimism at the moment.
And what about Abdul Jalil, the former justice minister who set up this National Council? I mean, is he seen as a rallying point for the opposition, or is he seen as someone with links to the regime?
Well, he is a rallying point for the opposition at the moment. He is the first member of the cabinet who actually resigned and denounced the violence and the brutality of the regime. He did say clearly that he was not going to run for an official post if the regime did fall. I think at the moment it works. Once the regime falls and they talk about an interim government, I think it will be a completely different conversation, because this is a tribal community and every tribe would want to have its own political posturing, if you can call it like that. Now, some other people tell me, as you mentioned, well, at the moment we need him because he understands how the government works. He knows the different personalities around Gaddafi. When Gaddafi appears on TV, he can explain to people who is around him at the moment, who is missing. That gives a lot of indication of what is happening in Tripoli exactly. But as you said, people do think he was part of the regime, so somehow he would be discredited if there would be an interim government.
OK, Hoda, interesting stuff. Thanks very much indeed for that. Hoda Abdelhamid in Benghazi there. Now, the US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton says Washington is reaching out to Libyan opposition groups seeking to overthrow Muammar Gaddafi. John Terrett is in Washington, D.C. for us. John, Clinton has offered all assistance to anyone who wants to overthrow the Libyan leader. What else has she been saying?
Well, Shuli, you're absolutely right. The Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, she's in the air at the moment, heading up to Geneva in Switzerland, where she will take part in human rights meetings at the UN Human Rights Council. But before leaving Washington, D.C. this morning, she told journalists that the United States is indeed reaching out to many different Libyans, as she put it, in the east of the country as the revolution moves west towards Tripoli. She also said that the US is prepared to offer any kind of assistance to Libyans who might wish to try to overthrow Muammar Gaddafi. But she also said, as a qualifier, that it's too soon to say how all this is going to play out. And surely this dovetails very nicely with comments from two leading United States senators on national broadcast here this morning. John McCain from Arizona and Joe Lieberman from Connecticut. One is a ranking member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. The other serves on the Homeland Security Committee in the Senate. And both of them had a message for President Obama, which is it's time to get tough with President Gaddafi. Senator McCain in particular, who our viewers may remember as challenging President Obama for the White House in 2008, said it's time to impose a no-fly zone across the whole of Libya. And then playing into what Hodder was saying from Benghazi, he called for the US government to recognize the provisional government that is now forming in Benghazi, namely that National Council that Hodder was talking about, and also calling for a war crimes tribunal. But he ruled out any kind of ground assault by United States forces. Julie?
And of course, as you say, Hillary Clinton is in the air. She's on her way to Geneva. Who's she going to see and what is she hoping to achieve?
Well, Julie, I think this is part of a multi-pronged attack by the United States to try and bring this situation in Libya to as much of a peaceful conclusion as we can possibly get at this stage. And I think it plays into what you saw yesterday at the United Nations in New York, where there are now sanctions against the Gaddafi family in terms of financial sanctions and travel sanctions and a weapons ban, the sale of weapons ban to Libya as a result of what the Security Council did yesterday, Saturday in New York. Now here comes the Secretary of State going to the Human Rights Council. Now, the Human Rights Council replaced the much discredited Human Rights Commission back in 2006, and bizarrely, to a lot of people's surprise, in 2010, Libya was elected almost unanimously to this body. So they're going up there, and the idea is to try and push, see whatever they can get in terms of movement against President Gaddafi out of the Human Rights Council, alongside what's been done in the Security Council. But of course, it's also an opportunity for the Secretary of State to talk to very, very senior politicians from around the world to discuss behind closed doors their next moves. Shuli?
OK, John, thanks very much indeed for that. John Terrett updating us from Washington, D.C. there. Still to come here on Al Jazeera, as more and more Libyan cities fall to the opposition. What are the options left for Muammar Gaddafi? And struggling to feed their families, how skyrocketing inflation in India has some in the country calling for revolution.
Hello again. It certainly is rather cool for many of us in the western parts of the States. If we take a look at the satellite picture, we can see the cloud here all feeding down from Canada, dragging in all that cool air and bringing us a fair amount of snow as well. It's going to be another rather unsettled day for many of us as we head through Monday, and still not that warm. San Francisco there only getting to around 13 degrees. It's far milder towards the east. Look at the temperatures here. Atlanta up at 24 degrees, and that's 75 Fahrenheit. All of this rain, though, is pushing its way across us, and behind that it will turn a lot fresher. Now, a bit further south, there's plenty of sunshine for many of us, but not all of us. There are some showers. They crack off over parts of Nicaragua and then push all the way down through parts of Colombia and into Venezuela. Heavy downpours out of that, and at times the showers will be banding together to give some more prolonged outbreaks of rain as well. Over towards Europe, and generally here things are quite quiet, but they're certainly not that warm. Moscow, as a top temperature, will be getting to -12, and in London the temperatures here are tumbling away as well. London this time only getting to around 5 degrees. For the Mediterranean, that's where all the unsettled weather is. Lots of wet weather, strong winds too, and that's also affecting us through parts of Algeria and Tunisia for Monday as well.
He's taken stolen goods and he's now dumping them onto the world without any sort of consideration for consequences.
From people making the news.
If the North will be saved a lot of trouble, I think it is important that they should come together.
To those it affects.
We do accept that there was very bad mistakes made in our banking area.
Behind the headlines.
Most South Koreans are not interested in reunification.
Is the inside story. At this time on Al Jazeera.
Welcome back. A reminder of our top stories here on Al Jazeera. There's been more violence on the streets of Tunisia as Prime Minister Mohamed Ghannouchi announces his resignation. 3 people have been killed, several others wounded in clashes between security forces and demonstrators since Friday. The US Secretary of State says Washington's prepared to offer any kind of assistance to Libyans